Hi there. I'm Dr. Myrdalis Diaz-Ramirez, and this is the Design Your Physician Life podcast. Welcome to this episode brought to you by our maxAllure Mastermind, an exclusive mastermind for physician entrepreneurs. Today, Dr. Christina Shenvi, an emergency room physician and creator of the Time for Your Life, will be with us. She's so amazing. She helps busy physicians manage their time in a way that is in line with their values. We're very excited to have her here. We actually have a great conversation with Dr. Shenvi about time management. Are you ready? Let's go.
Welcome to the Design Your Physician Life podcast, where you will get excited about being a physician, learn the tools that can help boost your success, and great tips from successful doctors. Join us to unlock the keys to an amazing physician life. And now, here's your host, Dr. Myrdalis Diaz-Ramirez.
Okay, so thank you, Dr. Christina Shenvi, for being in our podcast today. We're very excited to have you talking to us and our audience about time management. So thanks a lot.
Thank you. I'm excited to talk with you.
So you're a physician, you're an entrepreneur, and we'll talk about that. And you teach, besides taking care of your patients as an emergency medicine physician, you teach other physicians about time management, right?
Yes.
Let's start from the beginning. What inspired you to become a physician?
You know, it's funny, Myrdalis, we make the decision about where our career will go when we are so young and we have no idea what being a physician means. Now, maybe if you grew up in a physician household, you have more of a sense, or if you shadowed, maybe, but really not really. And it's kind of funny to me that we end up changing the course of our lives based on some sort of idealized view of what we think physicians do when we're in our early 20s. But the reason I'm still a physician and the reason I still like it are I've figured out what are the things that I really want to be about. And I've realized that I could do almost any different job. I don't have to be a physician. What I really want to do and what matters to me is I want to be able to relieve suffering, whether that's patient suffering, or I work with students a lot, so relieving student suffering, or faculty members or other high-performing professionals relieving their suffering. That's number one. Number two is I want to be able to solve increasingly interesting and complicated problems. I love solving problems, figuring out what are the issues, what's the data, how do we put it all together, how do we break it apart and put it together again, how do we predict a solution? That's number two. And number three, I want to work with great teams who know different things. I don't always want to work with people who just know one thing. So those are the three requirements for me for really having a fulfilling and enjoyable job and career. And medicine meets that. And I get to work with fantastic patients and students and other faculty members.
And I think more than that, like more specific to what you do being an emergency medicine physician, you have mentioned three big things that people need to know and be and want in order to become an emergency physician, especially when you're taking the task of helping so many people in such a short period of time in such critical scenarios, and also with the need to be part of that team that's going to take that patient from, many patients go to the emergency room and they might not really need an emergency room, but many show up and, they really need the work of a good team. So team strategy is a great thing, especially for emergency physicians. So when you were little, maybe 8th grade, 9th grade, did you ever think that you would be a physician someday?
I thought about it, and that was definitely on my radar. And then during college, I decided, I really love research. I love the basic science. I love the problem solving and the thinking and the discussion. And so I first went and did a PhD. And then I decided, I love this intellectually, but the day-to-day is so much more isolated. And so I wanted to do something that involved more direct impact with people. And so then I switched and after my PhD and did medicine.
So I take from your story, you didn't have any physicians in your family, correct?
Correct.
And the first time that you saw a physician was probably like your pediatrician or something like that, right?
Yes, sporadically, not even regularly, just, once in a while we'd see somebody, mostly for
And
vaccinations.
and well, vaccinations are important, as we have learned
As we know.
very recently. And where were you when you were in college?
I went to Princeton and was a chemistry major and just loved the intellectual excitement and interest and planning and the research parts of things. So that was part of what motivated me to then go into a research PhD.
And did you finish your PhD before going to medical school?
I did. I finished up my PhD at Berkeley and then went to med school at Yale. And there, very late in the game, decided to do emergency medicine. And I don't think there's any one perfect specialty for anyone, just like there's no one perfect person out there in the world for you. But I loved a lot of the things that emergency medicine offers with fast pace, like you mentioned, and ability to really make an impact.
I heard you say already something about that you like planning while you were in college. And I'm wondering if those were the beginnings about your passion about teaching time management to others, to physicians. What can you tell me about that? When did you start thinking about time management specifically?
That has really grown up in the last 5 to 10 years. One of my roles in my current institution is I direct what's called the Office of Academic Excellence. And in that, I help lead a group of physicians and we coach students on how to be successful, whether it's taking their licensing exams, taking their midterms and finals, or on the wards. And what I found was that many of the challenges that manifested in academic difficulty really were rooted in time management difficulty. So how do you manage your time to learn all the stuff you have to learn in med school? So then I became very interested in time management. And more than that, it's not really about managing your time. Time is not a thing. I can't pick up time and mold it like Play-Doh. Really, it's about managing yourself and about managing your thoughts. So I became very interested in the psychology of procrastination or of overcommitment or perfectionism or imposterism. And so I started reading for several years voraciously on the topic. Books, the primary literature, educational psychology, studies from back in the 70s, and started to fit it together into a model that I think is really helpful. And I would teach it to students, and then I started teaching it at national conferences. And the faculty members said, "Oh, wow, this really resonates with me." So then I realized, there's a huge need for help with this, because if you talk to anyone, you walk down the hallway in the hospital, you say, "How are you?" The answer is almost always busy, super busy, crazy busy. And we all are constantly feeling so busy and so overwhelmed. And so I thought about, well, how can we relieve that? What is the solution to that? And so I put together a workshop that I've done a number of times at different institutions, and then also just through my own website called Time for Your Life, that works with people intensively to say, okay, how can we solve this problem of the continual overwhelm or the continual feeling of being behind or that things are piling up and you'll never get to them?
So I graduated 25 years ago from medicine, 20 years ago from my fellowship in pain management, and never, ever through my years of college or before or after anything, nobody talked to me about time management. So in the last 20 years, and with your experience, the things that you've seen, have you seen a trend or any clue that any of our institutions are picking up on this need for their trainees, for physicians?
Institutions and national groups are picking up on it. I think about, for example, just the 80-hour work week change for residents and recognition that, hey, we don't function well when we're working 100 hours a week. We are not good at being, present and being the physicians that we want to be. But I still have not seen really a bigger movement towards teaching these things, just like we teach the medicine part or the, managing a team or managing the OR part. And it's very ironic because how we spend our time is how we spend our life. And we're taught all these things about this is what you do, but not then how do you step back and say, wait, is this something I really want to do? especially in academia, we're given just more and more and more things that you can do. And most academics are high achieving type A people who were straight A students and who have a lot of trouble saying no, or a lot of trouble saying, maybe that's just not for me. And so as a result, the most common problem that I've seen among academics and other physicians is the overcommitment, the too much on my plate. I've never met somebody who says, yeah, I just have not enough on my plate right now. I would just like some more things, please. Please put some more things on my plate for me. I'm not busy enough. And that is one of the most fundamental problems that I think is also leading to burnout, in addition to many other systematic issues.
I think all those things that you have mentioned have one thing in common, which is going to be at the basis of your workshop. How do you decide when to say no when you have a boss that's, pushing you, pressing you, or you see that somebody else might get that tenure and then you want to get there, or you have somebody who's overwhelmed and you want to help them because you're a helper, you're a healer, you want to do these things. So how do you learn to say no? What's the main thing behind making such a decision?
First, it comes down to you have to decide. Many, many times we have this narrative in our head that says, oh, I have to do this. I have to do that. And when we are thinking that way, we are putting on a victimhood mantle of learned helplessness. And we know from the research that when you are thinking in a learned helplessness manner, meaning learning that you can't control things just happen to you, you have no say in what happens in your life, and it's usually negative. We know that when we have that mindset, we have less creativity and less problem-solving ability. Also, we just feel terrible walking around all day feeling like that. So the first step is for you to own everything that you do. If you're on a committee that you hate being on, that is yours. First, you need to own it. You chose to do that, and you are continuing to choose to do that. You get to choose whether you go into work every single day. Now, am I recommending you don't go into work? Well, no, because you might get fired. But you're choosing that. So just changing first your mindset to say, I have full agency in my life. I am not being controlled and nobody can tell me what to do, is just so freeing. And then the second thing is you have to decide. So when we are given new things, instead of reflexively saying, okay, sure, I can do that because we want to help or we want to be involved and engaged, first crystallizing in your own mind, what are your priorities? What are you about? I love the idea from Jim Collins' book, Built to Last, of the BHAG, the big, hairy, audacious goal. And he talks about what are the things, he's referring to companies, but what are the things that this company is really about? Or for you, the other term he uses is the hedgehog concept, which comes from this fragment of Greek poetry that says the fox knows many things, but the hedgehog knows just one thing well. And we often in medicine are good at many, many things. And so we accumulate hedgehogs. We've got the research hedgehog. We've got our family. We've got our clinical practice. We've got our administrative duties. We've got our publications. We've got our public service or community speaking. And before you know it, we are trying to care for and handle 20 different hedgehogs. So the first thing is saying to yourself, what are the things that really matter to me, that I care about, that I'm good at, that are serving a need, and ideally that we can get paid for, although certainly we do many things that we are not paid for. So first, agency. You decide everything you do and how you spend every minute of the day, and noticing and correcting when you start to have these mental patterns of, I have to do this, I have to do that. And then second, deciding what is important to you, and then matching what you do to those values. So creating a schedule dictated by your values rather than constantly just playing catch up and being told what to do by your schedule.
So when you have somebody who comes to your workshop, how many of those have already done a vision board of their lives, what they want to do? Because that's going to be the center, as you say, your values, your principles. And then from there, then you create what you're going to be doing while you're spending your time to serve that. At the same time that, as a physician, you're serving others, you're helping your family and all these things, but to put it into context, how many times do you see physicians coming to you and they have already done that work?
Usually not. Usually almost none, I would say, that I can think of. people tend to have a vague sense of, well, I care about helping people, I care about my research, or I care about getting tenure. But really the next step is to dig a little bit deeper. And we do this exercise called the 5 whys, which is taken from business and industry to kind of understand the root cause for things. So for example, if I ask you, okay, you are running your Mastermind course, and I won't do this live, but we could if you want, and ask you why. Why do you want to do that? And you give an answer. And then, okay, well, let's dig deeper, really why underneath that. So for example, some people who are running on this treadmill, trying to get publications and speaking in order to get tenure. And you say, okay, well, why do you want tenure? And they say, well, that's how you get recognition in academia. Okay, well, why do you want recognition? And not that it's judgmental. That's fine if that's what your goals are, but why do you want that? And you start to dig, and there's so many layers of, well, because I think that's what I have to do to have worth. Or I've been told all my life that I wouldn't succeed and I have to prove other people wrong. Or I constantly have felt like I don't belong. And I think if I attain X, then I will have that sense of belonging. And those deeper reasons are really what drive us. And they're so subtle because they're just assumed. We have embodied them or internalized them without really questioning. And so then when you start to realize those underneath layers of your motivation, then you can say, you know what, maybe getting tenure doesn't matter to me. Or maybe I can find a reason that resonates with a positive motivation, something that brings me joy and meaning rather than something that is trying to stave off shame, fear, or guilt.
Yeah, and those move a lot of people. One of the things that you mentioned earlier was burnout, right? Like people have burnout, and time management, like being busy and feeling overwhelmed and not managing that appropriately can take us to burnout. Do you have like any particular story either of one of your participants, your students in your workshops, or yourself, where time management was the thing that was, one of the main components to that burnout on that physician?
Well, definitely for myself, I remember for several years when I was a junior faculty, kind of felt like I was in this strange limbo. And it ultimately boiled down to a lack of direction and meaning. Think about, as a student, you are constantly working towards that next grade or that next class or that next year. Do well in college to get into med school. Do well in med school to get into a good residency. Do well in residency to get a good fellowship. Do that to get a good job. Then you get a job. And then you kind of look around and there's no next rung on that ladder. It's
no
just
more tests to take.
There's no more tests. There's no more goalposts. And you're like, well, where do I go? I'm just floating. I have no direction. And then for me, I kind of was like, well, I guess this is my life now. And there were things that I loved and enjoyed, but I just felt a lot of burnout without a specific I didn't have my hedgehogs. I didn't have my hedgehogs in hand. And what helped significantly for me was really finding a role, finding a project, finding a purpose that could use my skills, could relieve suffering, and where I could solve problems in meaningful ways. And that for me was what helped pull me out of a lot of burnout. So it wasn't necessarily, again, it's not about managing your time. It's about managing your thoughts. And one example from somebody that I've coached who is just a fantastic, amazing person. He came to me for time management coaching and showed me his schedule and all the things he had to do. And it was just crazy, like waking up at 5 a.m., sometimes working overnight on clinically, and then working all day the next day with administrative duties. And anyone would be incredibly burned out with that schedule. And when we started to look at it and dig deeper, we found really he's not bad at time management. He was already very effective. He had his calendar, his schedule, everything was organized. But the issue underlying it was he felt this deep need to prove himself. So he would say yes, I'll be on this national board. Yes, I'll be the medical director for, less buy down than really what it takes. And yes, I'll lead this educational committee. And so he was so intensely overcommitted because of that need to prove himself. And once we worked through that, then he stepped away from major positions that he had and was able to clean out his time so that now he has time with his wife or doing things that he loves. So that was just a really gratifying involvement.
I love that. We were talking earlier that you are an entrepreneur, right? You have your coaching business, your workshops, teaching about the time management. How do you juggle being a physician and being an entrepreneur?
Yes, it's so funny because I really don't even think of myself as an entrepreneur, but I guess I am. And I think part of that is honestly my own imposterism that like pops this little head up and says, "Are you really an entrepreneur? Are you faking this?" And reminding myself that, okay, I'm not starting a Fortune 500 company, but this is a place where I can add value. And it's funny because people always ask, like, how do you do it? How do you do it all with kids and work and this and that? And I really do try to practice what I preach. I am constantly still learning also, but owning what I do, deciding intentionally, and then the next step is really planning carefully. So planning time for deep work when I really need to focus, planning time for shallow work. So putting email block times in my day rather than just being distracted on email all day. And then when I'm working, putting all my focus into whatever I'm doing. So if you're trying to work on something and you are also, checking emails or your email is dinging, or you're also on Instagram or Facebook or constantly task switching, that is cognitively draining. So to work with a deep focus, what you're doing is protecting your cognitive bandwidth. And for me, this certainly helps with burnout as well. If I'm able to focus well and work well, I feel better at the end of the day. Still tired for sure, but I feel better because I don't feel like my mind has been so scattered. So those are some of the primary, decide what you're going to do, plan it, and then do it well, working with a deep focus. And then the other key step is intentionally noticing and managing my own thoughts. So for this, it's called Stoic meditation, is one way of looking at it, where you are observing your thoughts and then choosing thoughts intentionally. And the way that thoughts trip us up is, for example, if I have a task I'm going to do, and then I start thinking, why should I even do this? This is terrible. It's not fair. I don't want to do this. It's going to be boring. Or why should I write this paper? It'll just get rejected. Why should I make this website? Nobody will go to it. Why should I make this course? Nobody's going to sign up. So those thoughts get in our way, and then we procrastinate, or we don't even start. We say, yeah, it's too scary to start a business. I'm just going to, keep my nose down and do my job. So noticing the thoughts and then kind of intentionally analyzing them and saying, okay, is this true? Is it true that this is going to fail and no one will come to your website? I mean, maybe that's true, but could I be okay with that? Is it worth it anyway? And most of the time, the thoughts that we believe that hold us up, they aren't even true. We're held up by fantasies. When we say things like, this will be terrible and I'll never be successful, often that's not true. And yet we let it keep us from doing the things that we're really excited about. So deciding what to do, planning how you'll do it, doing it well with a deep focus, and then reflecting on your own thoughts and being intentional about it.
That's awesome. So Christina, you were talking, you mentioned our mastermind, and yes, that's where we've worked together, helping our physician entrepreneurs, coaching them in our mastermind. You've been part of that. The exercises that you've done there have been just extremely valuable to the people that were talking. And one of the things that we've seen in our sessions is that mindset is so important. So when you're saying, is this going to be a worthy challenge? Instead of that's going to be hard, when you're saying that people thinking about what we're calling limiting beliefs, this is not going to sell, people are not going to come, all these things. Is it worth for me, for my purpose, for my values, to go through this process? And then that's when you plan, and then you try to organize yourself in that way. One of the things that I'm seeing within younger generations is something that you talk about, when you have these periods of time, these chunks of time where you are trying to dedicate just to one function, because every time you get interrupted, it's like a restart, right? A reset on anything. And then you have social media coming through, bam, 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 all the time. You see the kids with their cell phones, and then they need the cell phones for school, and everything is there. The medical school books are on their cell phone. and they need to carry that. And then at the same time, you have the input of all these, whatever it is, Instagram or TikTok or social media, Reddit, whatever it is coming through. What have you been doing with your students to manage that type of input or distraction?
Oh, great question. So there's two things that I would say for this one. First is to look at this as a habit. So we know that habits have this cycle where there's some cue, and then that creates a little bit of a craving or a discomfort, and then your response, and then a reward. So let's say that you have your Facebook up or your email up and you see that little dot that means there's new notifications. Well, that's a cue. And now you have this curiosity, you have a craving. It's like an itch that you've got to just go scratch. And so then you go, you look at it, you delete it or you view it, and then that goes away and you have a reward. You feel like a relief of that discomfort or that itch. And so when I think about habits, whether it's this or any other habit, I think about how can you disrupt that habit at any of those stages. The cue is the easiest to disrupt if it's an external cue. So turn all the notifications off, like no sound notifications. Those are the worst. I hate when I'm on Zoom and somebody else's computer is ding, ding, ding. I'm like, oh my gosh, how does that not drive you nuts? Removing the cue, changing the environment so that you are not tempted to the distraction. For me at work, I've developed the habit of when I get into my office for a day in the office, I go get myself a pitcher of water and I put my phone in my purse across the room, because we know if the phone is right next to you, that's going to serve as a visual cue again, and you'll have that craving and temptation.
But what if somebody calls? What if they need me right now?
Oh my gosh. Nobody ever needs me right now. Almost never does somebody need me right now. And you could leave it so that, certain phone numbers can get through, or, there's different tricks and things you can do with silencing notifications. But if that is really a problem, then every 2 hours, check it. There's almost nothing that happens that 2 hours will be a problem. So remove the cue. And then another thing you can do is disrupt it at the level of the response. So let's say it isn't a notification cue. Let's say it's just that uncomfortable feeling like, I need to go just check my email, or I need to check my social media. Changing the response to that craving. And you could do that by creating some other habit that you do. For example, whenever I feel the craving to go to my phone or go to my email, I will take a deep breath, take a drink of water, and say some sort of mantra to myself. I love mantras. It can be anything. It can be silly. It can be serious. It can be fun. So for example, you might choose a mantra of something that reiterates the identity that you're trying to create. So when I feel that craving, then I will instead take a deep breath, close my eyes, and reiterate, I am a person of deep focus. I will apply all my mental energies to what I'm doing, whatever it is to you, or you can make it silly. And then the last thing you can do is kind of change that reward. So create a reward for yourself in your own mind. And maybe it's with that mantra, maybe it's with that identity that you're creating, or maybe it's another positive thought that creates that reward for you in your own mind. And what that does is reinforces the new habit. So that's the first method, is to see this as a habit and to look for ways to disrupt it. The second thing I would ask is, when you feel that craving and you want to go to your phone or go to your email or go to your distraction, what is it that you are really seeking? So for me, sometimes if I'm reaching for my phone to look at Facebook, what I'm really craving is connection, or I'm craving somebody to, like something, or to give me that hit of dopamine. I'm craving some news or information or connection with a friend, or I'm craving praise. Maybe I want lots of people to like my picture because I'm really craving praise. So what is it that you're really looking for when you're going to these things? Or for email, maybe you're going to your email obsessively because it gives you a quick way to feel productive. If you're writing a paper or doing some other big task or doing something that you don't like, that's harder. That's harder to do. It's uncomfortable. We feel like an imposter. We feel self-doubt. And it's easier to just go to emails and, bang out a few emails, and that makes us feel good because we feel like we've been productive. So just starting to notice those thoughts of what you're truly looking for when you are distracting yourself.
Oh my goodness, Christina, you have given us so much to think about. Just for this newer generation, that's really, those hits of dopamine happening every 6 seconds. It's really difficult to get them away from that. It's really going to be a worthy challenge for our society so that they can take care of patients in the ER and be focused on what they're doing or in the operating room. But, something that's really worthy for them to do. So we've discussed main points in terms of how time management is not really about time, but really about yourself, setting your goals for your life around what you want to achieve for yourself based on your principles and your vision and mission for your own life, and then setting everything around that. And then how you can identify some strategies to get rid of distractions. We could be talking more, we know, like defining procrastination and imposter syndrome and anything like that. But as you said, start with the basis that you established here. And to summarize, do you have something else that you think would be special to send maybe away in the terms of a story about time management for our listeners here?
I would love to just leave people with the idea to think about what would a perfect schedule look like for you with your values. Let's say you started from scratch, not chipping away at what you have right now, but building from the ground up. What would a perfect schedule look like for you? And of course, often people's first reaction is, well, I would just be on a beach or on a yacht or whatever. But there are also some constraints of reality that, if I want to pay the rent, if I want to keep the lights on, then I need to have some sort of gainful employment.
Unless you become a radiologist.
Then you don't need lights on.
And then you work from the job, right?
Then yes. So within those constraints of your family, your situation, what would a perfect schedule look like? Maybe it would be part-time. Maybe it would be part-time clinical, part-time admin or research, or maybe it would be part-time overall. But what would it look like for you? And what is keeping you from it? What are those motivations? And sometimes people say, well, money, I can't afford to cut down. Okay, well, if you think about it, you probably could. It would just involve other sacrifices that you don't want to make right now. So then own that. Say, yes, I could downsize, but I want the house that I'm in. And so I'm going to keep working full time. Own that decision, but really reflect on what are the motivators that are driving you to be where you are now and where do you want to be? And then what is just the next step? One next step to help move you towards it so that you can be more fulfilled, live a schedule and a life that's in line with your values, and feel less stress and overwhelm.
Awesome. So now one bonus for our listeners. I would like to hear what it is to participate in one of your workshops, how it goes, what can people expect, how they come to one of your workshops, and how do you see them leave? What happens?
Yes. So the workshops are a 4-week intense course where there's about 3 hours of work per week that they do on their own with videos and deeper dives into all the topics that we've mentioned. And then reflective work that they have to do to really force themselves to do the painful, uncomfortable, reflective part. And then we have an hour and a half together each week for 4 weeks. And 1 hour is kind of an interactive discussion of some new points. And then we have a half hour each time of group coaching. So people can bring problems, we can workshop it together, we get input from the group. And what I've seen is so many people make really significant concrete steps to feel better. And sometimes they tell me, oh, now, 6 months later, I've kind of forgotten or I've backslidden into my old ways, but always coming back to the same principles because the same truths will always apply. We just tend to forget them. So it's been incredibly gratifying for me to see people who have said, oh yeah, I was 6 months late writing this book for my publisher. And now in this month, I finished it. or I really wanted to do this master's program and now I've finally kind of worked out my life so that I can go and do it. So I love seeing people's lives change in big ways or in small ways, just saying, hey, yeah, I recognize now I have an approach for how to make things better. I have a system or a framework for what I can do to work with less stress.
Well, I'm going to give you one story from my point of view because you've participated in our mastermind and you're one of our coaches and one of the favorite ones in our group, I have to say.
Oh, thank you.
So one of the students, physician that you coach in our group, after you coach this person, eventually won 4 hours a day. So what happened to this person is that they were driving 4 hours, like 2 hours each way to work every day, and they could not make the decision of changing jobs closer to home. And they had quite a few children at home, and they wanted to achieve many things. But that courage came from a session with you. So that physician now is not only gain 4 hours a day every day, is now involved in studying for real estate investment, is now spending an enormous amount of time with their family, with their children. And that was thanks to the awakening that your session brought to that person. So thank you very much. I wanted to give you that update because it's really been like, we were all excited in our mastermind for these doctors. Like we were like rooting for them, like go. And when they came finally and told us about it, you were a very significant part of that decision and that transformation in that physician's life. So thank you for that.
I'm so glad. That means a lot. That's wonderful for him.
Well, I'm going to go and end up here. And we're going to have everything available where you can contact Dr. Christina Shenvi for Time for Your Life. If you want to tell us about your website, your workshop, your Twitter handle, where we can reach you.
Absolutely. You can find me on my website, timeforyourlife.org. And any upcoming workshops will be listed there. And you can also sign up for my periodic emails and send me an email through there. And you can follow me on Twitter at CLShenvi or find me on LinkedIn. I would love to connect with you.
Oh, thank you very much. Thanks a lot, Christina.
Thank you. Bye.
Well, guys, that's another episode for us today. Stay tuned for more of our Design Your Physician Life podcast, which was brought to you by our maxAllure Mastermind, an exclusive mastermind for physician entrepreneurs. We will continue to bring you useful resources to develop your physician entrepreneur life, like we did today with Dr. Christina Shenvi. Her company is Time for Your Life, and you can find her at www.timeforyourlife.org. Thank you for joining us. We hope that you had a great time. Please stay tuned. Visit our website, www.maxallure.com. That is MAXALLURE. Don't forget to subscribe, like us, give us 5 stars, share the wealth, share this knowledge with your friends and family, and we hope to see you soon. Thanks. Bye.
Please remember that Design is not providing specific financial, medical, or career advice. Our only intent is to stimulate your appetite for growth by sharing our experience and those of our speakers, coaches, and guests. Your personal growth and success will be unique to your circumstances and your hard work. We sincerely hope you enjoyed the show and look forward to seeing you next week.